So thank you guys for joining for today another mock interview session. And today we have two managers. I want to introduce first Adeel Mansoor. He's a senior engineering manager at ChowNow for QA. And Kenst, he's engineering manager at Promenade Group, also for QA. All right, Chris, please tell about the cast.
Yeah, so
what is this?
I'm president of the Association for Software Testing, and we run an annual conference, which is happening this year in sunny San Diego, California, November 7th and 8th. So it's a 2-day conference. We have the first day of tutorials. So we've got Tariq King, we've got, I'm blanking on a bunch of people's names. We have some really great tutorials. So the first day is all tutorials. Second day is full day conference. The theme is hands-on. So it's going to be a lot of hands-on testing. We're going to have tester games. We're going to have testing competitions. Food is all provided. Like I said, so that's November 7th and 8th. Tickets and early bird tickets are still available, so you can get a really good deal right now. All you have to do is go to the associationforsoftwaretesting.org. I know that's a mouthful, associationforsoftwaretesting.org to learn more, or ping me, Chris Kenst, on LinkedIn, and I will send you details.
Little disclaimer, today is educational event. It's not a job opportunity. So, and Chris and Adeel, they are active hiring managers. And who knows, like in the previous meetups, we already have several occasions like when our participants, interviewees, were actually hired through our mock interview. So just keep it in mind, right? And what is mock interview today? So we're going to ask you just 2 questions. Tell me about yourself and what did you do at your last project? And Chris and Adeel, they will ask you based on that the follow-up questions. And in the end, we'll give you feedback. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But right now we're gonna have like 30 minutes and we wanna do ask a manager session. So it's kind of interesting, right? So 2022, we got different job market compared to previous year or even like 6 months ago. A lot of layoffs, and we want to chat about like a little bit about job market, what's going on there. So, and you guys are welcome to ask any questions that you may have. So let me start. Adeel, Chris, first of all, want to say thank you that you are participating, take your time on Saturday morning and, you know, volunteered to be asked those questions, right? So could you please tell us, like in 2022, in our job market, what are you looking in the candidate? What kind of challenges you are facing right now? I don't know, Adeel, do you want to start maybe?
Yeah, sure. Job market 2022. I mean, it's been a roller coaster, really, right, Chris? Obviously, I think the economic condition has a big impact, but overall, like I think everybody I knew was hiring in January. But that's not to say people aren't hiring now. Like I know I'm not hiring unless it's for a critical position right now, but a lot of other managers I know are hiring, and they are still looking for, you know, good people. That's how I see the job market right now. You know, not as much competition as if you were looking for a job in spring of this year, but definitely people are hiring. I see a lot of chatter. I see people hitting up, and I also feel like if you're a company who's not living up to your employees' expectations, people are going to leave you. So
interesting.
Chris, yeah, so I'll echo what Adeel just said. So it's definitely one of those situations where, like, again, we've slowed our hiring pace. So we're still like personally, like Promenade Group is still hiring people, but the rate at which we're hiring has slowed. So we're still growing in this overall market, even though the market is kind of, I think what you're seeing in the market just in general is a pullback from people that went and hired too much in the past 2 years and have seen their sales flatten out. It's still the same challenge, though. You're still trying to find qualified candidates. You're still trying to fill those critical positions. And then the newer challenge that we didn't have a few years ago is that you can now hire across the United States, really. And so, which is both a blessing and a curse. So it means that, like, if you're in a very small area, you can get hired by a bigger company or a tech company that's, growing fast. But then the downside is if you're in a congested market, you're like, how do I set myself apart? It's no longer geographical based. So it's a roller coaster. It's been fun.
Interesting, interesting. So let's talk about candidates. For example, I mean, Chris and Adeel, I already asked you this question like back that maybe a year ago or something, right? But still, for many of us and for many of engineers, it's still interesting. Like, I think it's different. What are you looking in the candidate when you are hiring? Let's say today we're gonna have for QA engineers. So specifically for QA engineers, what kind of traits and qualifications, experience you are looking?
Chris, you want to take that first?
It's going to go in the same order. Yeah, I'll take it. So that hasn't changed for me in the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm still looking for somebody who can problem solve, who can be given a problem and break it down into pieces and then solve it. So you're still looking for people with that kind of engineering mindset of focusing on the issue. And then I tend to focus personally more on testing skills. It depends on the role that I'm hiring for. So if I'm hiring for a tester rather than an SDET, I'm definitely looking at somebody who can tear apart a problem and address it, but then also understands like where testing fits in, where quality fits in, and how do you address those kinds of challenges. So that kind of stuff hasn't really changed. And then if you have coding skills and those kinds of things, we can dive a little bit more into that. But those basic skills of problem solving, if you're a tester, do you understand testing? Do you understand different techniques and when you should automate something, when you shouldn't? Those kinds of things are always, I think, valuable. A lot of the soft skills stuff for me.
Yeah, pretty similar in that way. Problem solving is super important. One component of that is, you've learned something, whether on your own or through experience. Can you apply it in new situations? Is another one where it comes up. If I'm thinking about hiring somebody who's mainly going to be testing backend, they've done API testing, might give them a hypothetical problem to solve, and if they can apply what they've learned, great. Otherwise, if they can't, that's a problem, because work is dynamic. Things are always changing. So I think that really helps to really think through that. The problem solving helps. A lot of, I think for us, a lot of behavioral questions, just drawing from your experience. And then, if we are hiring for SDETs, there are coding challenges, there are other things that are involved. But I think also for QA engineers, we want to hire technical QA engineers, even if they're not programming. We still want to hire technical engineers who as an example, if they're doing backend, understand backend, doing front end, understand the components of front end. It's really important.
So I have a follow-up question then. Can you share like what is your hiring process for QA and SDET positions? Like what are other steps?
I think I can share mine. It's pretty standard, and there's no secret to it. If you speak to a recruiter, they'll tell you the same thing, and it's pretty much the same across engineering, right? There's a resume review process that's happening where you're not really involved, but that's happening. And if you are selected, then you have a recruiter screening, where a recruiter might go through some soft skills, go through some experience questions. Then you move to the next round, where you're going to have an interview with a lead or a manager. If that goes well, then there's a series of panel interviews depending on your level of experience. There may be 2 or 3, and that's it. There's an offer. What's different for positions that require coding, you may have like you may in that first session after recruiter screening, you may go through a technical exercise with the person, with your interviewer.
What kind of technical exercise would you be able to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not a secret. There's no secret sauce about it. It could be just doing like a code pairing exercise, seeing how you solve a problem together. And I think for us, it's really important. It's not a winner take all kind of thing. If you can really talk through your problem solving skills, you can show that you're getting close to a problem. Typically across engineering, like that's good enough. So it's not a high pressure thing. You're not expected to remember obscure parts of object-oriented programming, stuff like that. You can problem solve. You can use the interviewer as your Google for syntax and stuff like that. If it's for a more senior position, then that session might be more like system design focused, as opposed to coding exercise.
Chris, how about you?
Basically what Adeel said, I do the same thing, except that so it's like resume screen, recruiter, talking to generally a hiring manager. So in that case, it would be myself. And if that goes well, then there's always a homework assignment, a take-home assignment. Depending on the position, if it's just a test position, it'll be, I want you to test something and give me a test report. If it's an SDET or a coding position, it's here's a homework assignment. I want you to build me something, and then go through Git flow and submit a pull request. And then regardless of the position after that, it's a panel interview to like talk about and what you did and why you did it. And in that case, you are looking for somebody who understands what it was that they did, and they weren't just like, I put something up, and you're like, well, no, you should be able to walk me through. And it's okay if you don't know things, like Adeel saying, we'll help you bring out the best, but like, we just want to understand your thought process and where you were going and why you were doing a thing. And a panel interview, maybe some interviewing with some other stakeholders, and then offer. So it's very, very similar process.
Chris, really, really interesting. We almost exclusively used to do a take-home assignment. And then we've kind of, depending on the position, have started to like open up not having it, because sometimes, I don't know if you noticed it, very interested to find out. Sometimes we would say candidates spend like 1 hour doing this, and it wasn't timed. So some people were spending a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's the part we didn't like. Like, we didn't want people to spend a lot of time on this. It wasn't, typically it wasn't difficult, and it wasn't, that's the thing we were afraid of. We were like, hey, are we putting, it's a balance, but then life can be stressful for others as well, no matter how much you try to put them at ease that it's not winner take all. We have thoughtful people interviewing you, but that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that part yet, but it is a concern. So like, one of the things that we put in, we're like 2 hours max. And then I always ask when somebody submits something, how long did you actually spend? Because I want you to be honest. Like, if you spent 9 hours on something, I'm like, A, you spent too much time on this, and B, like, now we have to scope down what I think you would have accomplished in 2 hours, right? And part of that too is just like, hey, can you follow directions? Like, if you are reporting to me and I'm like, listen, spend 2 hours at most on this task, and you go and spend 9, like, we have a problem now. Because now, like, I don't know if you can actually understand the scope of your work. And if you can come to me and be like, some people will go an hour or two and be like, I didn't get very much done. Can I spend more time on it? And I'll be like, yeah, like, but like communicate with me. So I find that whole process is really useful. I wouldn't mind changing that into a pairing session. So it's and the thing about hiring processes, they're always changing and iterating on it and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. I've started years ago, and I've dropped so many of the things that I thought were going to be really important and are not important now. So I totally get that.
I can give you from my perspective, because I work with for today, I work with 7 different clients, startups and like mid-sized companies and actually big enterprise. So take home assignments, and yes, it depends on the position. What I mentioned that, let's say for senior role, usually they my clients, they don't ask for take home assignments. For like transitioning from junior to mid-level, some of them they do. But what is my insight that I found, that companies who's require take-home assignments, they usually get less candidates, obviously. Not all candidates willing to do this. But company who is doing on pairing or like during the interview coding challenges, they have bigger conversion rate, right? So they got more candidates who's willing to do this. Chris, do you give a take-home assignment before the first interview or like after? That's another thing.
So the first interview, so like there's the resume review, reach out, you talk to the recruiter, and then you talk to the hiring manager. And so that's really the first interview, is the hiring manager. That's because it's usually me, and I'm like, do I want you to go? Do I not? And then do the homework assignment, because that's at a time also that we can discuss, like, do you think you'd be able to do this? Like, is this even something that you'd, because it's fair. People have families, and like, I don't think I'll be able to do this. And like, when do you, that kind of thing. There's always a risk too that you're going to end up weeding some people out. And so we're constantly looking at that bias of like, are we only getting single guys that are able to do it? And like, we're not getting people that are married and that kind of thing. Like, you're not asking those questions, but you are kind of looking at it like, are we excluding people? And you kind of adjust the process so that you don't.
So that makes big difference, to be honest. I mean, I like what you guys are doing, because some companies, they asking take-home assignments before the first touch with a candidate, and usually it's like huge drop. Like nobody wants to do anything or commit to anything if they don't see the return, right? But
well,
like,
and there's a rapport thing too. Like, if you apply and somebody's like, finish this assignment, you're like, I don't even know if I want to work for this company. Like, I haven't talked to anybody yet. There's no rapport going on. Like, I don't know if this person is going to be a good, like, there's all those questions. And then if you have that first interview, you can get people excited about joining.
Yeah, definitely. That's I'm 100% on board with that. Yeah, that's awesome. The question would be like about technical questions. I understand that for SDET role, it's a lot of time when people get, when they asked algorithm data structure questions, but for, let's say, for QA engineering role, not necessarily SDET role, what kind of technical questions you usually ask, guys?
Technical questions for QA engineers.
Yeah.
I think some of the simple ones are, it really is aligned with, it all starts with what are the requirements of the job, or what skills will they have to be successful in the job, really. Once you analyze that, like, say, for example, if it's backend, then you want certain level of like SQL, or just maybe not even SQL, like relational databases, like they're able to look at multiple tables and solve problems. So that could be one for QA engineers. That's pretty straightforward. Another one, again, if it's backend, do they understand the RESTful API components? Do they understand what's happening in the background on server side? Can they debug a problem? which the debug one may be applicable to other people as well. But for mobile QA, you want to ask them about things around proxying, right? Charles proxy, these other things. You may ask technical questions about that. For front end, you may dive more deeper into Chrome DevTools and how that can be leveraged, or from automation perspective, even if they're not writing automation, usually they're the first line of defense for debugging problems. Do they understand things enough that are happening at the browser and server level to be successful? I would say those are some of my top ones. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It depends on the role and what you need from that person in that role. Like you were saying, if it's a back-end role, yeah, you're gonna need to know more about APIs and like how the layers of the application are separated and what that means for your testing. I hire a lot of we're a web application, so that means it's a lot of like dev tools, and do you understand APIs and what's happening behind the scenes of an application for that particular reason of like, I mean, even from a very simple, hey, you're going to write a bug report. Don't just say thing is broken here, give some details, like how do you isolate that problem? And so those are the technical questions you can get into, like, how would you isolate this problem? How would you know if this is like a back end or a front end problem? Like you can dive into very deep details about an application in a short amount of time, and get some useful information. I will say that from an SDET, I never ask about data structures and algorithms, because that's just generally not something, like there's some very high level stuff that you can get to, but I really want to see, again, depending on the role that I'm hiring for, where in that application stack that SDET's going to be, if they can just build the thing that I need them to build. And so that's where the homework assignment comes from. I learned more about that than them asking them questions they could Google and get a response to.
Awesome. We have question from in the chat, like, what's the biggest hurdle in finding qualified candidates for position?
Chris, you want to take it?
So it's interesting to answer that question, because the biggest hurdle is just what we're talking about right now, is just qualifying a candidate. Like the hard part, the biggest hard part is you get a bunch of people that apply with the resumes, and you have to make sense of those resumes and figure out whether or not you want to talk to the person. And so that's like the first biggest hurdle, is that you are looking at somebody's resume and trying to glean, because people also tend to just shove everything they can onto the resumes. And our job as like a hiring manager or as a recruiter is to like pick out the pieces that we think make sense to determine whether or not you're going to be applicable to this or not. And so I think that's like the biggest first hurdle. And then from there, it's about going deeper into those layers about like, hey, are you qualified, and how do we find out if you're qualified? And it doesn't mean that you know everything, but it means that you can figure out how to understand the problems that you're dealing with, break them down, and then solve them. Adeel, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's really the hardest thing, especially in the beginning. I think as like I look at my resume personally, I don't have to use it often. I've been at 2 companies for the past 13 years, but what I've seen from other resumes that I really like is a resume that tells a story. I think there's too much emphasis on, in general, around like just put a bunch of stuff on your resume and see what sticks. Nothing wrong with that. You can try to figure that out, but highlight some parts of what you've done to tell a story. Right? If you write 5 languages down, like Java, C#, JavaScript, Python, tell a little bit of a story. Help, because this is how I see it. Recruiters and managers, they want to hire you. Help them easily understand some of that experience. Customize it. look at the job description and tell the right story. A couple of bullet points, maybe 2 or 3 things, just highlight them, some of your successes, or tell a little bit of a story.
Also, I can give also from my perspective and from clients that I work with, a lot of times companies, they're looking for some specific experience. Let's say, hey, I'm looking for engineer with working specifically with SaaS, microservices, and let's say they've been testing REST APIs, right? So, and that's from technical part, but from also industry part, also many companies, they prefer someone who has experience with fintech or in health tech or e-commerce. So guys, I mean, if you're an expert in your field, not just as a software tester, but also in the industry, let's say e-commerce, right? Or it's it's a huge thing. You should, as Adeel said, write this story to emphasize your strength in your field. That's definitely would be a big help to identify that you are the right guy. We have questions another, and I think we can combine from the beginning. Is there opportunities for people without much experience? I think, and I'm on the market and applying as a fresher, but it's challenging even to get the interview. So I think the question is, we can combine, is there jobs for entry-level people who just want to get started in QA and yeah, kind of, is there jobs or is there opportunity how they can get there?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I think there's also it's a supply and demand as well. There are a lot of people who don't have, there are a lot of jobs, but there are also a lot more people who are competing, like entry-level jobs. You also have a lot of competition. Chris, you probably know, if you ever post a junior or entry-level position, you might get 1,000 resumes in a few days. So there are opportunities. It is hard. I'm not gonna lie. It is hard for new grads. It's hard for people who have done technical things. It's hard for people who only have maybe less than a year experience. It is hard, but it is possible. I've hired people. Even when I wasn't looking, I've hired people with less experience. Yeah, I think it is hard though. It's a numbers game. You gotta stay motivated. You gotta really go out there and look and learn with what's going on. Maybe even connect with other people who are looking for jobs in your space and figure out what's working and what's not.
Yeah, as Adeel said, it's hard. The challenge of hiring somebody who is a fresher is, again, the things we've been talking about are, how do you qualify somebody for a position? And so I haven't solved this problem. I don't know of anybody that has. So the question is, if you're trying to qualify somebody for a position, and as a company, you're making a bet on somebody that they're going to work out. How do you kind of hedge your bet? How do you figure out if somebody's going to be good? And honestly, it's really difficult if you're just blind shooting off a resume to a junior position. It's just really hard. So there are some things you can do to stack the deck in your favor. One of those things is, especially in testing, is that you can take on testing projects that you're either crowdsourced or unpaid. I understand the unpaid route is a lot of people just don't have the time to do that. I totally get it. But if you are looking to stack the deck in your favor, finding some way to gain experience to be able to talk about that experience is going to be an advantage. You can do crowdsource options and try and get a bit of experience there. But again, you still have to be learning at the same time. And then building out your network. So if you know somebody, if you know Yevgeny and you're he's got a position open, he knows who you are, and he probably has a better idea of what your qualifications are than just somebody who's shooting out a resume. And so networking and going to meetups and doing those things to get in and get people to know you are going to increase the chance that they're going to take a bet on you.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm trying to solve this problem for the last, I would say 4 years probably already. So unfortunately, in the United States, most of the companies, unless if they're really big, most of the companies, they are treating like to get on board really fresher or like to help people to find the first job. It's like a charity, to be honest. Everybody has a need to, everybody has a business needs to solve, right? And basically companies are paying and hiring managers are looking for someone who will be solving, not to teach him to solve it. That's the reality. Yes, it is a struggle. It's like, it's like, don't ask me how I make my first million, like because it's pretty much the same thing. Don't ask me how I got the first job. It's a hustle, right? And I see there is a lot of, from recruiters' perspective, because as you guys, I used to be a former CEO of Test Pro Bootcamp, right? I used to teach people how to get into QA. And now I am on the other side. I'm on the employer side. And now I see a different perspective, right? So companies, they specifically asking me like, guys, we're looking for senior. We paying you to find me a senior guy, right? Or we're looking for mid-level, like at least mid-level. Unfortunately, for me, nobody asked me like, Evgeny, could you please bring me like 10 junior engineers or 10 junior QA engineers? However, we help. I had this experience, and that's actually you guys have to search up for this type of opportunities. So one of my clients, I suggested them like, hey guys, I know a lot of boot campers who is looking for a first job, but it's a struggle. So what we can do, we can grab 10 the top performers from the boot camps, from different boot camps, and we'll do a program, 1 month length program, like it's a bug bounty session, and they were participating. I'm not gonna tell the company name, but it's pretty well known. It's a unicorn company. And they did it, and they hired 1 person out of 3. So we brought them 10 graduates, and they went through like interviewing process, or like it was like very similar to mock interview, and they decided to pick only 3 of them. 3 of them, 1 of them, they got hired, he got an offer, basically almost without really rigorous interviewing process. However, obviously you see the numbers, right? Out of 10, only 1 person has been hired. So unfortunately, it's not everywhere, and not all companies can afford that. Actually, I have an announcement. So as I just mentioned, right, I do a recruiting, I work with several companies, and this problem is actually still real, right? People cannot find a job, and it's a two-ways problem, and companies cannot find the right person, or they don't really know what is the quality of graduates, right, of their knowledge. So we decided to do a reverse recruiting. So we are working and partnering with several companies, and we ask them like, hey guys, what if we train and bring you the certain quality of QA engineers? They will be without prior experience, but they have some background, some technical background, and we'll do our filtering and training process. So yeah, that's this is a pilot program, and by the end of this program, everyone who will be going through will have an interview with those hiring managers. And by the way, Adeel, Chris, just want to ask you, like, what do you think? Would you be interested to also to take a part or like to contribute in that? I know it's a tricky question.
Yeah. No, I knew it was coming. I think it's really like you mentioned, there's a problem, and the solution is really bringing people together, and part of it is making the community a better place, right? Because right now there's definitely a disconnect with hiring managers and people looking for a job, people who are willing and have potential, trying to get them there. I think there is a little bit of a gap there in between, because like traditional education model will teach you, then you go out there and find, like, it creates a disconnect, right? They optimize for getting people on board, but not really solving the bigger problem, right? Whether that's, I hate to say it, whether that's universities or boot camps, and whether you're, whether you boot camp, university, like it becomes exponentially harder if you don't have a job by the time you graduate, right? It becomes exponentially harder. So yeah, I mean, I would be totally down, and I think part of it, things that you've shared with me already, things you're saying that right now, it's got to be an inclusive and accessible program. I think that's really important, and really based around mentorship, not just here are things you should learn, and now go out there in the world and try to convince somebody enough to get a job, which what we talked about is like really, really hard.
Yeah. So, Chris.
I was going to say, yeah, we've talked a little bit about this, and I'm a little hesitant always just because I don't have a ton of time. But I love the effort, and as Adeel was saying, like, this is a problem that needs to be solved, and there's it can really benefit the community if we can figure out how to actually solve this. So I'm willing to do my part and help however I can without I'll put a toe in instead of a foot. But no, I think there's a huge need to try and figure this out. And forget who said it, but like, one of the challenges that companies have is that they don't always know how to invest in people and bring people up. And so I think there's just a huge opportunity around this, because like I will say, our company's never really meant to hire junior people, but it turns out when you do hire junior people and you skill them up, like, they just turn out to be your best people. And this is where the industry becomes really backwards, because it's like, we're always looking for people with a ton of experience, who have experience. And it's a catch-22, because everybody's like, how do I get in? And the answer is, well, if you just bring people in from the start and grow them, they're your best people. So
Yeah. Even a toe is a huge help, Chris. I'll tell you right away. So yeah, that's the problem that we want to solve. So we want to train people for certain jobs that it's not like, what other boot camps are doing right now. So they just playing number games. So out of 100 students, how many students will get a job? Nobody knows, right? It's totally up to them. And like, and pretty much university does the same thing, right? They don't guarantee jobs. They don't like, it's going to be up to you to find a company and to go through the interview. So since I have an access to companies, and I already speaking with several companies, so we're gonna train for specific their jobs, and hiring managers, they will be interviewing you guys. And again, there is no upfront cost. So again, this is the pilot program. If you guys would be interested to join, just sign up to our email list. I'll put it in the chat, the link, and in the general chat as well. General chat. Yeah, just whoever want to join, please welcome. It's we don't know if how I mean, definitely it's going to be limited, like for a certain amount of people, but we're trying to find and help, especially like people who was in help desk or tech support, also QA bootcamp graduates, or who has some certain level of technical background. All right, we have other questions, and again, guys. So it's 10:40. I would like to have a mock interview. As I mentioned, unfortunately, the participant who's supposed to be today, she cannot participate this morning, he mentioned. And if you guys, whoever want to get a feedback, this is a valuable thing, guys. You won't get this on your real interview. You pass the interview, done. Everybody will say, thank you. We'll go with another candidate, stronger candidate. But the truth, it's going to be hard to get the truth, like why you've been rejected. If you guys want to do this, raise your hand. I'll unmute you. Don't worry, it's we'll post on YouTube, but I will blur your email and blur your resume, or like I'll do the magic, so you'll be safe.
I think there's one interesting one here by anonymous candidate. Candidates whose English level B1 or less. I'm not really sure exactly what B1 means, but I'm guessing it means if English is not your first language, maybe you're not fluent in English. I'm not sure about other industries, but at least in the software industry, that doesn't matter as much. I would say. Be comfortable in and just be comfortable knowing that people aren't really judging you for that. The people I know, at least, can't speak for everybody. Just be comfortable, just slow down, get feedback. Like if you can get feedback from somebody, get feedback on how you're coming across, because sometimes a lot of candidates, it's not if you're using the wrong words, that's not an issue. If you have an accent, it's not an issue. It's usually maybe you're speaking too fast. Slow it down a little bit. Get that feedback. Check in with your interviewer. Hey, should I continue with this explanation, or was I able to answer your question correctly? Get feedback. Do those things. I don't think it's an industry where people really hold it against you if English is not your first language.
There is another question from Hater Fernandez. In your opinion, is better for one candidate to be specialized in specific kind of test, for example, front end, mobile, or know a little of all environments of test and front, back, and mobile? Adeel, Chris, what are your thoughts about it?
I think number one, the most important thing is to represent yourself correctly. If you put something on your resume and you cannot speak to that, it doesn't matter. Maybe you got to speak to the recruiter, maybe you even got to the hiring manager, but it's not going to matter. So number one, represent yourself correctly. Like if you know those things, put them in there. If you don't know things that you're really interested in, find ways to gain experience on that and get it on your resume, but also also be able to speak to it. And what I was talking about, like being able to apply it in different situations. That would be my advice.
I saw this question pop up and I have been pondering it in the back of my mind. Yeah, so as Adeel was saying, like you want to make sure that you can, whatever it is that you have on your resume and whatever your experience is, you should be able to talk to it at length. And so I don't necessarily care if somebody is specialized like in performance testing or whatever it might be. But what I'm trying to gain from our conversations is whether or not I think you can fill the role that I have. And so you just need to be able to talk to all of those things. So I don't know if there's an advantage to being, there's a lot of talk about being a specialist versus a generalist. And that is this question about whether you should specialize in something or be a generalist. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. And it's going to depend on the company and the individuals and who's hiring. So I don't have a great answer other than just to echo what Adeel said.
In my case, I would say it's better if you have specialty. Like, let's say if you're a mobile tester or mobile QA engineer or mobile SDET, well, definitely hiring managers who is looking specifically for mobile SDETs, you would be outstanding from the crowd, definitely. But at the same time, definitely you limit yourself for that specific area. Or same thing with the web, right? Is, for example, I have a client looking specifically for test automation for the web automation. And well, some hiring managers, they're more flexible. They can say, okay, if you know how to code and he's been working with, let's say, mobile automation, Appium, so he should pick up really fast for Selenium, and vice versa. But not always. It's a. I would say it's obviously would be better if you know what you're doing in specific area and you highlight this thing. You will be noticed much faster, but at the same time it could be you could limit yourself to that area, so other positions, let's say for performance testing, right, you probably won't be picked for that, and vice versa. Performance tester, they really good at that, but for test automation, web, they may be not the best fit for some hiring managers, just saying. Anyway.
Yeah, and just to getting on that, like, don't lose sleep over the job that you're not, the one particular thing you don't have. Like, there's plenty of jobs out there. Go for those. Chris mentioned this earlier. Things have really opened up because of the pandemic. There are remote jobs that all over, so you're not even just limited to local jobs anymore. Focus on the things that you already know. And if you don't know something, but you really want to, go learn that thing and then add it in there. I'll say that about me and Chris as well, right? We can go out there and apply for jobs. We're not going to be a fit for every job we apply for, even though we have a ton of experience, we have a track record, and that's okay. Me and him are not going to lose sleep over jobs that we are not qualified for.
There's so many things that people don't tell you about job hunting. So one of them is interviewing is a skill, both on the manager side and on the participant side. And so the more interviews you do, even if they're all rejections, you end up learning how to talk through an interview and figure it out. It's also a numbers game. If you go to a very expensive coding boot camp and you finish, the end of that coding boot camp is they try and get you to apply to 5 to 10 jobs a week, like a day. Like they just want you to just play the numbers game, get hundreds of applications out there in the hope that 1% of them will turn out and you'll get hired. That may not be what you want to hear, because it is depressing to be told no, thank you constantly. But that's something you'll just kind of have to get used to.
Yeah. 100%. Okay, I think we're ready. Candidate number 1. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, awesome. So my first question would be, please tell us about yourself and your last project.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. First of all, it's the first time, as a fresher, I asked the question. It's hard to get to the point even to have the interview. So it's the first time. I really appreciate your feedbacks, your time. So I am in this IT field around the year where I have a background in education. Initially, I started with, online courses. I did a UX UI design course from Coursera. It's a Google certificate program. I liked how the software is developed, designed, but I was more interested how everything happens at the back end. So I did the research, and where I came up with a testing part of software development, and I found a bootcamp where it's specialized on SDET. And I finished bootcamp and also worked on several projects during that bootcamp. And as you can see, I used the Selenium WebDriver for web automation. I used the Cucumber as a main language. I used the Java, and I did the backend testing using for manual part is Postman, and for automation REST assured library from Java. And what else? I did the database testing also with a MySQL Workbench for manual part, and I used the JDBC for automation part. I think that's all. I'm not sure. I'm so nervous. Yeah, and talk about my last project. I worked on internal management system, then handled different aspects of HR. So in that HRMS application, there are two main user types, the admin user and employee user. Admin gets full access to the application while the employee has a limited access. So both go under different modules. And so my responsibility, we work as a team, build a framework, and mostly did a functional testing. I used a build management tool, followed page object model, and it was a hybrid framework. It supports BDD and DDD. As I mentioned, I used Java as a programming language, Selenium WebDriver for writing automation test scripts. So yes, if you have questions, please.
All right, and candidate, what kind of jobs are you looking for?
Honestly, like right now, I'm applying in the market, and junior position and entry level. But my struggle is, I'm talking with the recruiters, and they saying even for juniors they want 3 years of experience, and like, but it's like a loop. If you want to get a job, you need experience, but if you need experience, you need to get a job. So it's like a kind of loop that's not ending.
We call that a catch-22. That's the phrase. Yeah, I totally understand that. So are you still currently with an intern?
No, I did finish internship, and it was like month. No, yeah, it's a September. Yeah, it's more than a month. So I'm actively looking for the jobs. It was month, but nothing happening.
Adeel, keep going. Sorry.
All right, cool. Well, let me ask you, thank you so much for volunteering, because I can't even imagine how that feels. So like, kudos to you, and putting yourself out there is like, that has to be the approach. So really appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. I'm gonna ask you dive into some questions.
Mhm.
So number one, you mentioned you've used Rest Assured for
Mhm.
Java.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what are the advantages of using Rest Assured versus just using other native Java libraries for API testing?
Okay, so that's a good question. Let me think about that. Actually, I never think about that, but in my experience, I used the only Rest Assured library. So the benefit I saw in that, it has a built-in methods. That's a benefit in general for the library. So I can use all the built-in ready methods that will do the API testing easy for me. That's what I see, the first one. And I think, yes, for now it's that, but I can think more on that.
Yeah, no, awesome. So also taking that to the next level, like in what scenarios would you use Postman versus Rest Assured?
Okay.
Java and Rest Assured.
So if I need to do, quick API testing, I would personally use a Postman, because you do your manual stuff, and also there is another option. You open the DOM, you inspect the network. I can do that with Postman, and that if I need to do quick API testing. But if I have a core functionality of the application, I would use a Rest Assured to do that. So it's checking like a daily or weekly time. Yeah.
Nice, awesome. And you looks like you have mentioned here you have experience with Git and GitHub.
Yeah.
Specifically, so let's say I see here you've also used Maven and Jenkins. So is Jenkins your preferred CI/CD tool?
Yes.
Okay. And with Jenkins, can you tell me a little bit about your Jenkins experience?
So with the Jenkins, I have experience like it was already configured. So it's only that I get emails and check the reports that if the failed ones, there is a failed tests or passed in general, like a reports in my emails. That's experience that I have.
Okay. And can you, so seems like you have experience with debugging failures in Jenkins. Can you give me an example of a failure in Jenkins that you had to debug? You can pick whatever example you want. The more interesting, the better. But you can pick any example you want. Tell me about the situation, what was failing, what steps you took to identify and address the issue.
Yeah, so like when you get a report, it says, failed test. So in my framework that I was working in the last project, there is a specific failed runner class. It's a Cucumber framework. So there is a failed runner class. The first thing to debug that, to make sure that's a failed test case is I will run that failed runner class again, just to make sure it's failing. And then trying to figure out why it's failing. Then go from there.
Okay, so in that example, do you remember like what steps you took to identify and what was actually failing?
I'm thinking to get examples so I can give you, more detailed one. I'm not sure.
All right, that's okay. If you don't remember, that is a-okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I asked a bunch. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Adeel. So it says on your resume that you wrote, and I think you've already said this, candidate, that you've written test scripts. So how did you, where did those ideas for those test scripts come from? Is somebody assigning you stories and you're implementing them, or are you doing the work to identify what you should automate and what you shouldn't?
Oh, no, it's like when you write the test case, you have to clear requirements that we get from the sprint planning in general. Then when I have that clear requirements, then I will write the test cases according to that.
Can you dive into that a little bit more? So you're saying that you get requirements on what you should automate during sprint planning?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a part of the story, like maybe as a definition of done?
Part of the story definition of done.
Yeah. So can you kind of describe that? So like if you're at sprint planning and they're saying, hey, we're going to build this feature, I'm making something up, but like we're going to change the color of these buttons and we're going to move the UX around. Like sprint planning would be going through the stories that you want to work on, right?
Okay.
So does that mean that somebody has written stories around what you should automate?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So you're asking who would decide what to automate and what not?
Yeah. Are you just being given stories and asked to code this?
Yeah, in my experience, yeah.
Okay.
That was in my experience, yeah.
Okay. But so you do say on your resume that you identified test cases for manual and automation. So what is that different than what we were just describing? Like, were you actually coming up with what to test at some point?
I can do that. If you ask me, like if you give me a specific example, like this feature, should we automate or do manual testing? I can, tell why we should do manual and why we should automate for this specific feature.
Okay. Well, so I don't have that, and we don't have a feature in front of us, but can you kind of describe it a little bit about where that trade-off would be? Like in your mind, if you were asked to test something, when would you automate it and when would you not?
Yeah, so let's say, I just want to give the example, like I'm thinking about the example. Okay, so famous one is a login feature. So for the login feature, I would like to automate it. Why? Because it's a core functionality of the application. For example, let's go with Amazon, right? If I cannot get a login to my account, I cannot do any further functions. So it's like a core functionality. So I think it should be automated. That's a good candidate to be automated.
Okay, so one of the things you're thinking about is whether or not it's core functionality. Are there other attributes that you would also, other characteristics you would also consider
Yeah.
about whether or not you would,
So, yeah.
given the login page, is there anything else that would help you figure that out?
When you do the manual testing, so it takes time, it's a time consuming, right? So I would automate also the things that is repetitive, that repeating many times. So it would take, doing the manual testing, it would take time. So I would put that in automation, so it will take less time. That would be another good candidate for that too.
So now let's say you had something that existed past, so I like the login page as an example. This is something that everybody can kind of see clearly in their minds. So let's say that kind of like Amazon, a lot of behavior of our application happens after the login page, right? So let's say I want you to go in and like update an address. Like that's something we want to automate, is you're going to log into your account and update an address. Would you and let's say also that like there are 10 or 20 other features within past the login page that we want to automate. Would you navigate the login page for each one of those tests, or would you do something else?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. My daughter was crying.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just got the last part.
So let's say you have 10 stories. 10 Jira stories, and they're all about automating functionality past that login page, right? So you got to log in and you got to go add an address. You got to log in, you got to go add a credit card. You got to log in, go and update a birth date. So let's say you know you're going to have 10 stories and they're all going to have you log in and then update or create something past the login page. In each one of those tests, would you log in through the UI or would you do something different?
Would you log into UI? So I have test cases. Oh, like in my experience, the first thing come to my mind, like in a Cucumber framework, we have a feature to put a background feature, right? So I will definitely put that login one in a background. So I have a background, so I don't have to repeat it. I don't have to write, repetitive codes. I will put that in a background, and other ones would be like under the scenario part. So I would do that. So I hope I could answer. My mind was out.
No, it's fine. And everything that you're saying, I'm also putting into the context of like your relative experience, and I think that's a good point. So I'm not a Java person. So just looking at your resume, is Rest Assured a database or is Rest Assured a like test tool?
No, Rest Assured is a library from Java. So there is a built-in methods we can use for API testing itself. So it's a Java library. Like since a main language is Java, I use the Rest Assured library from Java.
So I'm going to get a little nitpicky on your resume. My son's also sitting right next to me, so I totally feel your pain there. So is Rest Assured? I'm looking at your resume and your little table there. If Rest Assured is not a database, but it's actually a test framework, well, yes. Aren't Selenium, Cucumber, and I don't know what test, again, but isn't TestNG, aren't those all test frameworks?
Yeah, the Selenium, Cucumber, all of them are TestNG. Yeah, I know. I did it in a rush, like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's fun. Okay.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I don't have any more questions. I do have feedback, but if Adeel, you have.
Yeah, I don't have any more questions. We can move to feedback. Chris, you want to go first?
Thank you.
Yeah. So as Adeel said, like, thank you for doing this. Being on the other side, we know this is really stressful because even though it's for fun and for feedback and for educational purposes, you're still putting yourself out there. So thank you for doing that. So the things that strike me of this resume, and this goes back to can you tell a story? So there's thanks Evgeny for zooming out. So in your profile summary, you're just listing a bunch of bullet points as opposed to telling me about yourself. So like one of the first things that I noticed just when zoomed out on this is that like you have done a ton of education, but yet like that's nowhere in your summary as the first thing that I could read. If you're like, if your summary was, I'm super like, I'm like super excited to be an SDET and I'm constantly learning. I've gone through boot camps. I've done like all these programs. So you can start at the beginning of your resume and start to set that story up, right? So as opposed to, and the thing that I notice as I'm looking through this, like I kind of see you repeating yourself a bunch. Now that could just because I'm assuming it's because you're very new at this. But like you're telling me that like Selenium and Java and Maven and Cucumber in your profile summary, and you're telling me about it in your professional experience, and then you're telling me about it in the table. And you don't need to do that. Like you don't need to put these. Like you do need to often list those things because scanners will look through and they want keywords. So definitely keep the keywords in there, but you don't have to repeat yourself. Yeah, there's a typo on bachelor's degree and that kind of stuff. But the idea of telling a story is being concise, and you can use that profile, that summary, that introduction to describe you as a person, and like the fact that you're so excited and enthusiastic to be in this field, that like you're gaining all the experience that you can, like you're learning as much as possible, and then starting to list those things off, and you can really kind of tell that story about your experience, I think in a more concise and simple way. And that helps recruiters too. Like if you're sending in your resume and they're like, wow, she doesn't have a lot of experience, but like she's done like 3 different boot camps and programs, and like she's signing up, like your level of excitement, like I can feel that in your resume, because I see you're not just sitting down, you're not resting, you're constantly out there trying to better yourself, and that's huge.
Thank you very much. I took the notes. I will improve. And by the way, it's not my actual resume.
Okay.
Yeah, I just put it quickly. My actual resume doesn't have any typos, all the mismatched. I'm sorry. I'm so
and so I'll also say too that like it's natural for people to want to go and use a template, but templates can get you in trouble sometimes, because you think the problem with the template is that you don't know what you don't need. And so if you don't start with a template, you often just put the minimum things you need, and that can be really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Adeel.
Yes. A couple of things that I really like. I like when I asked you about rest assured, and had you, I really like that pivot, right? It felt like you understood my question. And even though you didn't have that, you were very direct and very honest about like, hey, I haven't done that. I've used rest assured. And then you went on to highlight the sort of benefits of rest assured. Beautiful. That's kind of how, like, it's a good example for everyone to follow. I thought you did really well there. I liked when Chris was asking you about what would you automate, the specific question. I would automate things that are repetitive. Like we love to hear that. Managers love to hear that. And also you were you're very comfortable saying, let me think about that. You also want to do that. You don't want to just jump in there and start. If you want to collect your thoughts before you jump into it. So I really like that. Again, you also mentioned this is not your actual resume. That's great. I would say for you, really important, if you're going for SDET positions, it is linking to your GitHub profile. Have some examples for the manager to look at.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you already have that?
I have a GitHub account, but I didn't put it on a resume.
Yeah, if you're going for SDET positions, you have to put that on there. People, managers can go there. They file. They're seeing interesting things there, and they'll help you stand out basically. And I thought what was also really, really interesting is the sort of the UX UI program you've done. Like in general, that enthusiasm. Hey, you're out there. You're hustling. Those are great. So if you can find a way to highlight that, I would also say for you, if you're comfortable, if you get comfortable, you can reflect that in your resume and your GitHub profile, because then it ups the ante. Like, but people love to see UX UI experience, definitely.
Yeah, do you think it will help? I thought about that, but then I thought it's not, related to QA, and then don't put anything.
So that's where you tell the testing story, right? So this is how you so telling a story is about weaving in all of your experience. So if you just put it on your resume like it is now, it doesn't, I don't know how to connect those dots as the hiring manager. That's why if in your profile you're like, I in my experience of testing this, like I found that so many UI and UX problems that I wanted to so if you can tell us why you did those things and connect those, it becomes super powerful, because now you're showing us that you have like all these disciplines that you start to understand. Like you're not just focusing on this, but now you know a bit about this. You've expanded your understanding greatly, and now you're actually a bit more experienced and more skilled perhaps, but you got to tell us why. You got to connect those dots for us.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, candidate. I'm again, like, thank you very much for volunteering. Anyway, I think it should be very helpful for you for your further job search. However, I'm pretty sure, like, if that would be initial interview, you would go further to the tech questions. I mean, further for the next step and for the technical interview. And this is where usually, like, let's say the first screening you would be pass, and everything will be more interesting on the next step, like on the technical interview, on the coding challenge, and so on. Anyway, I want to say thank you to everyone. Let me stop sharing my screen. I don't know, Adeel, Chris, we have one more candidate who would like to participate, but we already ran out of the time. So yeah, I think let's keep for the next time. We want to say thank you guys. Adeel, Chris, we did today a tremendous job. I think it was very helpful for all of us, and it was fun. All right, guys, so if you guys want to participate in our next mock interview, as we have some, please join to our Slack channel if you haven't yet, and I'll post the next date. It's probably gonna be in 2-3 weeks, so next. And again, one more time, guys, sign up to our program, pilot program, if you want to, especially for new people who want to get a job in QA. So just put it in the chat one more time. And everyone, have a great weekend, guys. Right? All right, Adeel, Chris, I'll see you next time then. Bye.